The harsh realities of the Great Depression, 10 scandalous and shocking facts. The Great Depression, 1929 to 1939, wasn't just an economic crisis, it was a societal collapse that laid bare the darker sides of human desperation and systemic failures. Beyond poverty and unemployment, this period saw scandals, human tragedies, and outright atrocities. Here are the most shocking and scandalous truths about life during that time. Number 1. Hoovervilles, the scandal of shantytowns. By 1933, unemployment in the United States had soared to 25%, forcing millions of families out of their homes and into improvised settlements known as Hoovervilles. These shantytowns, sarcastically named after President Herbert Hoover, became symbols of national despair and governmental neglect. Seattle's Hooverville, located on the waterfront of Elliott Bay, housed over 1,200 residents and operated with its own informal governance. In New York City, a sprawling Hooverville in Central Park became infamous for its squalor, with families living in makeshift huts built from scraps of wood, cardboard, and sheet metal. Without access to proper sanitation, outbreaks of diseases like typhoid and dysentery were common. Herbert Hoover, whose presidency was defined by inaction during the early years of the Great Depression, famously declared, "Prosperity is just around the corner." To those living in the squalid conditions of Hoovervilles, this statement rang hollow. A former resident remarked, "We weren't just forgotten, we were abandoned." These settlements exposed the deep fractures in American society and cemented Hoover's reputation as a leader detached from the struggles of ordinary people. Number 2. Starving farmers destroying crops. During the Great Depression, one of the era's cruelest ironies unfolded. While millions starved, farmers were forced to destroy crops and slaughter livestock to stabilize plummeting prices. The Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1933, part of Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal, paid farmers to limit production. In California, farmers dumped thousands of gallons of milk into ditches while starving families, including children, scavenged for scraps nearby. In Iowa, acres of corn were set on fire, and in Texas, hogs were slaughtered en masse. These actions sparked outrage among the public and were immortalized by John Steinbeck in The Grapes of Wrath. There is a crime here that goes beyond denunciation: the fertile earth, the straight tree rows, the sturdy trunks, and the ripe fruit. And children dying of pellagra must die because a profit cannot be taken from an orange. By the end of 1933, over 6 million pigs and 10 million acres of cotton had been destroyed under government orders. While the program eventually helped stabilize agricultural prices, it came at the cost of immense public suffering and moral outrage. If feeding the hungry was possible, should economic stability have taken precedence over human lives during the Great Depression? Share your thoughts in the comments. What's your take on this moral dilemma? Number 3. The scandal of forced sterilization. During the Great Depression, eugenics programs targeting the unfit gained momentum, with over 30 states enacting sterilization laws. Between 1929 and 1937, more than 20,000 Americans were forcibly sterilized, often without their knowledge or consent. North Carolina became infamous for its aggressive sterilization policies, targeting poor women and minorities. Carrie Buck, a young woman institutionalized in Virginia, became a central figure in this dark chapter of history. In the landmark 1927 Supreme Court case Buck v. Bell, the court upheld her forced sterilization, with Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes writing, "3 generations of imbeciles are enough." This chilling decision justified decades of similar practices across the country. The victims, many of whom were minors, were left permanently scarred, both physically and emotionally. A survivor from North Carolina later recalled, "They told me it was for my own good. But they took my choice and my future away." Number 4. Cannibalism in starving communities. By 1932, reports of cannibalism emerged in some of the most impoverished regions of the United States, highlighting the depths of desperation during the Depression. One particularly harrowing case was reported in rural Arkansas, where a starving family allegedly resorted to eating the remains of a deceased neighbor. While such stories were often sensationalized by newspapers, they reflected the severe food shortages faced by millions. A farmer in Oklahoma recalled, "We boiled weeds to survive. There was nothing left to eat, not even for the dogs." These accounts underscored the government's failure to provide adequate relief in the hardest-hit areas, especially rural communities. Though rare, the specter of cannibalism became a grim symbol of how far hunger could push human beings, breaking down moral and social barriers in the face of unimaginable scarcity. Number 5. Children for sale ads. The heartbreaking sight of children for sale ads became one of the most tragic symbols of the Great Depression. In 1932, a Chicago mother, unable to provide for her family, placed an ad offering her 4 children for $2 each. The caption read, "You can trust them with all your heart." These ads appeared in newspapers across the country, reflecting the extreme poverty that forced parents to make unthinkable decisions. Some children were adopted into loving homes, but many others were subjected to abuse, exploitation, or forced labor. Dorothea Lange's iconic photograph Migrant Mother captured the anguish of these families, showing a weary mother with her children clinging to her, a portrait of resilience in the face of despair. The plight of these children highlighted the failure of the social safety net and left a permanent scar on the collective memory of the nation. Number 6. Forced prostitution. For many women during the Great Depression, prostitution became the last resort for survival. In New York City, brothels saw a sharp increase in clients, with desperate women accepting as little as 10 cents per encounter. Some families, facing extreme poverty, even pressured their daughters into prostitution. Mary Thompson, a 17-year-old from Chicago, later testified, "I was told it was my duty to save my family. I lost my innocence and my dignity for a few dollars." Reformers attempted to address the issue, but the lack of social support systems left countless women vulnerable to exploitation. The era's moral decline underscored the devastating impact of the Depression on women, who often bore the brunt of economic hardships in silence. Number 7. Child labor resurgence, the young workforce. During the Great Depression, child labor made a grim resurgence. By 1930, over 2 million children under the age of 15 were working in textile mills, coal mines, and canneries. They often worked 12-hour shifts for mere pennies. School attendance plummeted as children were forced to contribute to their family's survival. Eleanor Roosevelt, a staunch advocate for child welfare, remarked, "We cannot call ourselves civilized when our children are robbed of their childhoods." Photographs of children emerging from coal mines with soot-streaked faces became a rallying cry for reformers. These conditions exposed the dark side of the era, where the youngest members of society bore the brunt of economic despair. Number 8. The Bonus Army, veterans betrayed. In 1932, over 17,000 World War I veterans marched on Washington, D.C., to demand early payment of bonuses promised for 1945. Known as the Bonus Army, they set up camps and peacefully petitioned Congress. President Herbert Hoover, fearing unrest, ordered the U.S. Army to disperse the protesters. General Douglas MacArthur led the assault, which involved tanks, tear gas, and bayonets. The veterans' camps were burned, and at least 2 protesters were killed. One veteran lamented, "The country I fought for now turns its back on me." The brutal suppression of the Bonus Army shocked the nation and contributed significantly to Hoover's crushing defeat in the 1932 presidential election. Number 9. Desperate crimes, the rise of notorious criminals. The desperation of the Depression era fueled a wave of criminal activity, with figures like John Dillinger, Bonnie and Clyde, and Pretty Boy Floyd becoming notorious folk heroes. Banks, seen as villains of the economic collapse, were frequent targets. Dillinger, declared public enemy number 1 in 1934, led a string of bank robberies and evaded capture with daring escapes. Clyde Barrow wrote in a letter, "We robbed the rich because the rich robbed us first." Though their crimes often turned deadly, these outlaws were romanticized by a public searching for scapegoats and heroes. The rise of these criminals highlighted the pervasive sense of injustice and disillusionment gripping the nation. Number 10. Breadlines and soup kitchens, a nation in hunger. By 1932, breadlines and soup kitchens had become ubiquitous in American cities. In New York City alone, over 85,000 people lined up daily for free meals. Surprisingly, Al Capone, one of the nation's most infamous gangsters, opened a soup kitchen in Chicago, serving over 3,000 meals a day to rehabilitate his public image. Churches, charities, and individuals stepped in to fill the void left by an overwhelmed government, but the demand far exceeded supply. Malnutrition became widespread, particularly among children, who suffered from conditions like rickets due to vitamin deficiencies. In Boston, a 12-year-old boy was arrested for stealing a loaf of bread and told authorities, "I just wanted to eat." Breadlines became a potent symbol of the Depression, exposing the staggering inequalities of the era and the inadequacy of governmental response.